Hello, I am Super Orange Cat, and I recently watched an anime named Oreshura. It debuted in Japan in the spring season of 2013, and the best way to describe it is that it is a mix of a slice of life and harem genres. I watched the sub version of this. I am unaware if there's a dub, but if it exists, then it ain't on Hulu. So now I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the events of the show. Note, this is 13 episodes, so I will have to be brief and succinct whenever possible. The main character is a studious high school student named Kito Eita. He really is kind of the stereotypical harem protag. He's shy, nervous around girls, and with a lack of desire to really change. So basically, he's also every Smith song personified. His childhood friend Chua tells him of a new girl in his class who all the boys are into, a young woman named Masuzu. Now, because this is an anime, they end up sitting next to each other, and she starts showing signs of being attracted to him. Again, because this is an anime. He then asks to walk with him back home, and while he's asking her why, she proclaims in front of the rest of the class her love for him. You know. But once in private, he's a little suspicious, so he questions her motives, and she reveals that it was in fact a ruse to get all the boys to stop asking her out. Furthermore, she blackmails him into pretending to be her boyfriend by showing that she has his diary, which she plans to read to the entire class if he does not comply. So, left with no choice, he agrees, and the two start acting out the role of lovers. Chua, who of course is in love with Ada because, again, anime, gets mad, and we see a flashback way back when he announces that he wants to study to be a doctor so he can treat Chua, who at the time was suffering through serious kendo injuries. Masuzu, noticing that Chua is obviously devoted to Ida, concocts a new scheme to remove her from the equation. She begins by forming the club to reform maidens, an after-school club devoted to help girls woo boys. Masuzu then proceeds to read excerpts from Ada's diary, pretending it's from her own dead lover, to help, as the air quotes, Chua. Doing this gets Chua the attention of the school's basketball star. Masuzu and Ada decide to surveil their date, where it is revealed that it was in fact a ruse to see how long Chua would wait for the player. When the player and his friends start bullying Chua, Ada decides to defend her honor, like the white knight he is, by trying to scream stuff from his alter ego personality and by fighting the bully. The bully and his friends start going sicko mode on his ass until a stick is mysteriously thrown towards Chua. She then picks it up and uses her kendo skills to save Ada. This catches the attention of a young mysterious girl with blue hair. Soon afterwards, Ada starts getting daily letters in his shoebox. He wonders whether these letters are true displays of affection from Chua or just pranks from Masuzu, who at this point has more or less just taken the hobby of using their quote-unquote relationship to torment him, which is a recurring gag throughout most of the first half of the show. Is set to meet this mysterious damsel at the roof, because why the fuck not? It is revealed to be the diminutive Hime, a first year whose parents operate a bed and breakfast. She then embraces Ada while claiming that his ravings to the school bully triggered her memories from a past life where she was a princess and he was a champion. This obviously makes no sense, but go with it because again, this is an anime. At the worst possible time, because anime, both Chua and Masuzu walk onto the roof. Hilarity promptly ensues. Hime also joins the club to reform maidens and to learn to woo Ada in front of a girl who obviously loves him, and a girl she believes to be Ada's girlfriend. In the meantime, Masuzu's younger sister, who's basically a cross between Angelica Pickles and Nui Hareme, shows up and threatens to tell Daddy about what she is doing in Japan. She then kisses Ada. This leaves Masuzu visibly shaken, a state that actually kind of disturbs Ada, because of how stoic Masuzu usually is. The girls and Ada run afoul the hall monitors, including the disciplinarian Fuyumi Ai, known later as Aishan. They are made to clean out the pool as punishment. While serving this sentence, Masuzu's sister shows up and tells her that Daddy wants her to go back to Sweden. The entire group objects, but Ada gets particularly heated when she steals Hime's poem about what it takes to be a princess and mocks her for it. Masuzu gathers the courage to stand her ground and tells her sister off. The summer fireworks celebration is fast approaching, and Ada must decide which girl he wants to go with, because again, what harem anime wouldn't have a summer fireworks festival? During summer break, Ada, who is at the top of his class, decides to take summer classes with his friend Kaoru and Kaoru's friend Achan, who happens to be the very same hall monitor who published the Club for Reforming Maidens, and at this time is currently threatening to shut down the club due to lack of members. Achan brags to the girls that she has an affluent boyfriend of whose existence the girls are skeptical of because they actually have more than 3 brain cells. It is immediately obvious that Kaoru is trying to facilitate Achan talking to Ada, and Ada gets suspicious. He notices that she is stalking him, so he talks to Kaoru about it and casually mentions Achan's boyfriend, a fact that leaves the usually calm Kaoru furious. It is then mentioned that the boyfriend, like the cake, was a lie and that Achan, unsurprisingly, is in love with Ada. In fact, she knew him back in kindergarten and has always kept her crush, a fact that should disturb every fucking body. He decides to go to the fireworks festival with Achan, but instead of going to the festival itself, she drags him to the village where they grew up and talks about her memories of him. The night seems to go off without a hitch until Achan mentions a piece of paper she turned into a makeshift marriage license more than 10 years ago. She then begs him to stamp it. Ada, who has fortunately taken the red pill, non-suicidally yeets himself off the mountain and onto the main road, where he happens to meet up with Chua and Hime, who are going to the fireworks festival. Later at summer school, Ada discovers Achan's notebook, where she compulsively wrote down how much she loved him, often referring to him as Takun. He mentions to her his secret personality because that's kind of the growing trend in this, is that he mentions his secret personality to every girl who asks about it. The one that Hime is in love with, and they seem to make up from the firework night's rough ending. Achan decides to join the club as a fifth member, making the club's existence valid. Ada starts having existential conversations regarding whether he has entered harem heaven or harem hell. As the girls preparing for a club trip to the beach, because again, anime, why wouldn't they be going to the beach? He slowly comes to realization he is in the latter. The girls fight tooth and nail for his time and start making their cases for why he should choose them. As the club joins Ada at his house one night, his overworked aunt shows up and claims that Masuzu doesn't really love Ada. It is shown that she is a game developer for dating simulators and that our company is actually, by some coincidence, having a contest to see who's the most head over heels in love girl. The girls all decide to join, and the aunt announces that as Ada's legal guardian, she would put Ada's stamp on the marriage certificate of whichever girl wins. Masuzu slowly comes to the realization that she does not feel the devotion that the other girls feel towards Ada, and she starts to have her doubts about her place in the club and whether Ada is better off without her. After a couple days spent at the beach, the day has finally come for the Miss Onedere contest. The girls first take their cases for winning, but Masuzu has gone missing. By coincidence, Ada meets up with Masuzu's bitchy sister, who, once again, is a cross between Angelica Pickles and Dui Harame, where she reveals why Masuzu is where she is. She was determined to be the jewel of the family's empire, putting more and more pressure on her until she snapped. She didn't know how to truly interact with people, so she became something of a sociopath. This conversation leads Ada to the realization that he actually gave a shit about Masuzu, so he tries to find her. At the contest, he sees Masuzu show up and proclaim that she didn't really deserve to be there. Ada then publicly tells her that this isn't true and that she means a lot to him. They then kiss on stage. Hilarity promptly ensues. The contest ends and it reveals that none of the girls in fact won. However, Chiwa did get an honorable mention. After having a conversation with his aunt, it decides that the best way to prevent the girls from tearing themselves apart for him is to simply get all the other girls to hate him. He fails in these endeavors by some bizarre twists of fate, and the girls decide that they will still do what it takes to have him, regardless of his newly developed feelings for Masuzu, a development with which she seems really strangely fine. So, ends with a distorted recap of events where key events have the characters rearranged, displaying that Ada is doomed to eternity in harem hell. Now, I want to go into the characters of the show again. First thing I want to talk about is the characters in this anime. Like I mentioned earlier, Kido Ada, the main character, is pretty boilerplate for a protagonist of a harem anime. He is an introverted, somewhat mature, closeted pervert who gets into wacky situations that get him to know a little too much about the girls around him. He swore off love, like the Morrissey song, because his parents abandoned him in the 8th grade to pursue other others. So just imagine that his parents just went to the grocery store to get cigarettes, but then like halfway through decided, fuck it, let's just become swingers. He was left with his aunt who works long hours as a game developer. Ergo, she is rarely home and seldom seen towards the end of the show, right when she's needed to. There isn't anything I can honestly say about this character that really hasn't ever been said about harem protagonists or even many of the other protagonists I've talked about, particularly the protagonist of Amagami SS. show which I tortured myself through 26 episodes of back last year. And he's debatably, actually, Kyoto Ada is debatably the least interesting character in the show. And that's perhaps by design. The first of the four girls we're introduced to is Shua, a diminutive Kendo wunderkind who is childhood friends with Ada. She calls him Akun and is made obvious from the jump that she is head over heels in love with him. She makes every excuse to be with him. She shops with him, eats dinner with him, and she goes out of her way to see him in school even though they're not even in the same class. It is shown that this devotion began when he mentioned that he wanted to work hard to become a doctor so he can help her recover from her career-ending kendo injury. The show really does spend far and away the most time in illustrating the relationship between these two as children and as teenagers. And I really think that this added focus did add actually extra dimension to the relationship, and honestly, that's probably the reason why I was rooting for an ending where they were together. Alas, the show decided to go with the route of many of its forefathers and chose the harem route because why not? The second girl is Masuzu, the beautiful Swedish exchange student. She is a cold, manipulative girl who seems to have a personality disorder. Don't know if it's borderline or bipolar. She's got one of the personality disorders. Throughout most of the show, she seems to be the one with the greatest control of the strings, controlling the movements and actions of Ada and even the rest of the girls, just for her own benefit and amusement. And she gains this leverage primarily through possessing Ada's personal journal, where he discussed his opinions of Chua and his many delusions of grandeur he had as a child. And in fact, she really used this book to give advice to the other girls, in air quotes. And like always, much hilarity ensued. She serves as a female mirror of Ada, actually. They both dislike the idea of love, and they really just secretly despise those who go through its rituals, which, despite the contentiousness between the two, is some weird common point which they find some solace. And I found that to be an interesting part of the relationship, but where Ada's disgust comes from his parents having a midlife crisis and having swinger becoming, cigarette swingers, as I'm going to call them, over the love with him. Masuzu's issues come from the lofty expectations placed to her by her family to the point where something clicked and she just snapped. One of the best moments, though, of the show came when everything just came full circle for Masuzu, and she finally realized how horrible, really came like how horrible she'd been to the rest of the club, especially Ada, and really questioning her place in it, and really just having this emotional moment, which, considering how stoic and how like proud of a person she is, really was jarring, but in a way that really showed that she did have a degree of development in the show, which is something you never really see with harem anime. And that's something I found to be pretty interesting. And it's reminds me of the Eddie Murphy movie Boomerang, where the basic plot is Eddie Murphy's character, he mistreats women, so he falls in love with a woman who mistreats him. And that's basically the plot of the movie, and it reminded me of that a bit. But and again, this was the best moment of character development in the entire show. Albeit the show was not dense in character development, virtually everyone was stagnant in this, and whatever changes were there were minimal or sometimes just gone in the next episode. The third girl here was Hime, who is a small first year student who made the claim that she loved Ada in another life. And of the four girls, I found her relation to him to be the most disturbing. Although you can say that most of her direct behaviors toward him were really seem to have innocent intentions, at the same time their connotations can be really just interpreted as strange. And the key point of this is the scene where she sneaks into Ada's bed in the nurse's office. Nude. She seems really quick to just give herself off to Ada in a way that even none of the other girls are willing to go. And she very verbally, openly joined the club just to learn to woo Ada. While you can make the argument that Chua and Achan just wanted to improve themselves in general, Hime was just there for Ada, and I found that to be a little creepy. And I'll argue she went through the least character development of anyone on the show. And actually, her character reminds me a lot of Peko Peko Yama from Danganronpa 2. Now, I have to give a bit of a spoiler alert here, because, Danganronpa is a very spoiler-heavy series of video games, and basically, Peko Peko Yama's plot line, not really a plot line, but her backstory is that She was an orphan. She was left and taken care of by the Kuzuryu clan, which was the family in charge of the Yakuza. And when they raised her to be the bodyguard of their developing protege, Fuyuhiko. Now, with all the care that she got from no one else, because the only people there for her were the Yakuza, even though they're the type of people they are. But considering that they raised her and that they took care of her in a way no one else was willing to, she felt this real feeling of like devotion to them and like thankfulness. But it got to a point where it just seemed more obsessive, especially since you started fixating on her quote unquote young master Fuyuhiko, who he himself seemed really uncomfortable with this, as in her behaviors, especially when it came out at the end that she was his bodyguard. She had this like weird stalker vibe about her. And Fuyuhiko really just seemed, in a way, kind of disturbed by it, although conflicted because there were obvious signs that he did love her. And this is something that's very testy among the Danganronpa fan base. Fuyu Peko is probably the most protected ship, I'll say, in the entire series. And considering how obsessed with shipping Danganronpa fans are, that's really saying something. In my opinion, it's a bit controversial on that, as in I wouldn't more or less root for it. Not because, oh, it's not horrible, it's a great love story or anything. It's just, I mean, Peko Pokuyama is clearly not in a good state of mind. She's clearly got mental issues going on here. She's clearly got this stalker feeling towards Fuyuhiko. She basically says, I'll kill everyone. She basically puts in a situation where he gets she was willing to suicide herself to get everyone else to be killed just so he can survive, you know. And also at the same time, I mean, it's not exactly Stockholm syndrome, but at the same time, it almost feels like it from her. And that's what I get from Hime too. Except for where he can say, well, Peko had to stay with the Kuzuryu clan because they raised her and that she owed them a lot. At the same time, Hime just kind of voluntarily like gives herself up, which I found a little disturbing, you know. But the last girl is Fuyumi Ai, which I'm probably mispronouncing her name. I'm gonna call her Ada on the rest of the way. She's a hall monitor who took summer classes alongside Ada. It is debatable she might have more issues than Hime, but again, I believe that she can be just summed up as your run-of-the-mill tsundere. She has a really aggressive mean streak, and she, like Hime, has a very disturbing fixation on Ada. Like again, like I mentioned earlier, she fell in love with him in kindergarten, and she held on to those feelings more than 10 years until they met again in high school. And again, that's the thing. I mean, if you're in high school, if you're in college and you're watching this, do you remember who like if you're like one of those kids that had like a preschool or kindergarten quote unquote girlfriend or boyfriend, do you even really remember them now? Better yet, do you really care about them now? Because actually, I kind of had like a quote unquote kindergarten girlfriend. It's a long story. And I honestly don't think about her anymore. And I stopped thinking about her by like first grade. So, like, it's just creepy that she's even thinking about him, much less still obsessively in love with him at this point. And her summer notebook for her summer classes, full of this like clumsy, lovesick poetry, bunch of Morrissey songs, impulsive writing. You know how, like, in the book 1984, it was the main character, Winston Smith, had a habit of going to the corner of the room that the telescreen cannot monitor and having that notebook and writing down, I hate Big Brother, I hate Big Brother, I hate Big Brother over and over again. She does the same thing, but it's creepier because she's writing, I loves Takun, and not even love, she spells it W-U-V-Z, with all that cringe. And I don't know if Takun is just like a term of endearment or if this is supposed to be intentionally a fully Cooley reference. But I mean, maybe it is. I don't know what the connection to Fully Cooley would be because this show takes the piss out of even. There's one period where they stop the show for like 4 minutes to basically just take the piss on Evangelion, like because they're reading his notebook, and he's basically describing his like, oh, the girls are in love with him, and they're clearly supposed to be based on the female characters from Evangelion. Like, okay, one's Asuka, one is definitely Rei. I mean, it's just like very obviously, it's like, and he writes the description of her, and at the end of each paragraph is like, and she cannot possibly be more in love with me. And the next one, could not possibly be in more love with me. And really, it's just, I thought it'd be funny too. A very good scene in this show. Debatably the best scene, actually. But this show was not shying away from references. There's also the Notebook is supposed to be made out to be a lot like the Death Note. And also the second episode when they were trying to help Chua get the basketball player to notice her. They had a plot line that involved her pretending to be a guitarist, and it's like, oh, if they're questioning you, just say a stand from Diamond is Unbreakable and you should be fine. I found that to be pretty funny too. And getting back to Achan, she is the most outwardly aggressive person in the group, and she was actually the last person to join. Now, for my opinions on this, as if I haven't given hints of it already, it would be very easy to write the show off as some run-of-the-mill harem anime, but I believe there is actually a bit more to it. Towards the end of the show, it really starts to pick up this bizarre meta element. Ada openly refers to his predicament as a battlefield, and in fact, I believe every single episode of the show has a title that has a format blank 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 is a battlefield, blank 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 is a battlefield. Like how the show Friends, every single titled episode is the one where blank blank blank, the one where blank blank blank, so on and so forth. You know, and I thought it was pretty interesting what they did. They really had this fixation on it. And he talks about wanting to avoid the harem route. And adding talking like he's aware he's in a harem anime, or like it's some type of weird dating simulator, which would make sense considering that the aunt makes dating simulators for a living. However, he wants to balance this out with his feelings towards the girls. Like, he never hated any, outside of debatably Masuzu early on, he never hated any of them. He would just hope that they would not be as creepy towards him. And he wanted to find a way to turn them out without devastating them. And this was hard, as the three girls who are not Masuzu, he were to turn down included a girl who had feelings for him for at least 8 years, a girl who has loved him for 10 years, and a girl who honestly believed that she loved him from another life. This was not going to be an easy task, and severing those ties were formidable. In 3 separate twists of fate, he fails to reject them, and he, in fact, actually made them love him even more. At this point, it was obvious that there was no way out. There actually was no exit. No Exit was a play written by French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre. Instead of displaying hell as a fiery landscape where demons torture you for eternity, he decided to go with a more subtle approach. In it, a man was locked in a room decorated in the Victorian style with 2 women. Through a slow and winding course of events, the characters become more and more miserable and get to the point where they all attempt suicide. But since they're hell, and in hell your body is, can't be killed, it's to no avail. And they are in hell, and hell is unescapable. And at the end of the play, the main character famously mutters the line, hell is other people. Anyways, I tell the show is a bit of a slice of life anime example of existentialism. Regardless of the actions of Ada, he cannot shake off any of the girls. They were attached to him. This fact is solidified by the montage at the end of the show. In this montage, some of the more notable moments of the show were played. However, the roles of the girls were changed around. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier how Hime was naked in the bed in the nurse's office with Ada. In the ending credits montage scene, it's Chua. So on and so forth like that. And not just that, but during most of the second half of the show, after all the girls have joined the club, they just frequently bicker almost entirely, either directly or indirectly, about Ada in front of him to each other. And it just, I think all this just really illustrated the cycle that Ada is doomed to a never-ending cycle of high school harem love hijinks, for better or for worse. And as he comes to realize, hell is other women. Musings aside, I was a bit miffed personally at the ending of the show. I personally just wanted A to end up with Chua, like I mentioned earlier. Her feelings seem to me the most genuine and purest of the girls. Like, Hime and Achan can be analyzed as like creepy, obsessed stalkers, and Masuzu didn't really like him until like the very end. And even then, the nature of her exact feelings for him were left a bit up in the air, whether it's like just as kinship or actually more romantic. Ada and Shua seem to have a general appreciation of each other, and they played off each other very naturally. Ada also physically defended Shua from bullies, and outside of debatably standing up for Hime's poem, he never goes to that extreme for the other girls. And I believe the show did drop a clue towards this pairing, as it mentioned that Shua still got an honorable mention from the Miss Onodere contest while the other girls were left wanting. It is also administrated a love test via magazine, like those girl magazines, and said it claimed that Shua was more in love with Eda than the other girls. I guess that magazine is like the teenage girl magazines you have this day, where it's like, test to see which one of you is the biggest tsundere. Top 10 sex positions. Number 5 will blow his mind. Pun intended. Stuff like that. But really, that's just all I have to say about the show. This show, as a harem anime, was pretty good. Although it's not necessarily, I don't think, something I'm going to be really returning to in the future. But again, not the worst show. Not the worst I've seen. It didn't go to like weird extremes that something like Amagami SS, or especially something like How Not to Summon a Demon Lord went to. But again, solid show. Not the best show. I'll say it's perfectly in the middle for me. I'll give this show a 7 out of 10. Have you watched the show? What's your opinions on this show? If you want me to do more like anime reviews like this with this format, please like, please comment. It helps me in search results. And I hope you subscribe to me as well. I'm Super Orange Cat, and that is all.